In the hills of Silvan, Australia, the Tromp family seemed like any other, diligently tending their berry farm. But in August 2016, they vanished without a trace, abandoning their phones, credit cards, and even their pets. Over the next few days, their bewildering 1,000-mile journey through New South Wales spiraled into a chilling case that gripped Australia. As they split off one by one, surfacing in bizarre locations, the nation was stunned by a haunting question. What sinister force drove this ordinary family to such extraordinary lengths? Authorities scrambled to piece together fragments of their eerie odyssey, hinting at a shared psychotic episode, a rare and deeply unsettling phenomenon. This is the Tromp family disappearance. Life on the farm was hard, but rewarding. Ever since Rihanna, Mitchell, and Ella Tromp were kids, they worked alongside their mom and dad, growing red currants and the delicious Silvan berries that made Australia famous among blackberry gardeners. As time passed, their work started to pay off. Mark Tromp, the family patriarch, got some excavating equipment and started offering earth-moving services in the area, while Jacoba Tromp kept things running, made jams and sauces, and welcomed folks who stopped by to pick berries. Whenever Ella had time, she would take the horses out jumping in the back pasture. As the years went by and the kids grew up, they decided to stick around and help run the family business. After all, who wouldn't want to spend their days in the beautiful countryside surrounded by loving family and friendly neighbors? The Tromps had a lot to show for their efforts, but their lovely, sprawling farmhouse was starting to show its age. It was 2016, and Mark figured that with the business growing, the perfect time to renovate was now, before things really started to fall apart. His workaholic tendencies were starting to get the better of him. It was the beginning of the spring season in the southern hemisphere, the busiest time of year when the crops had to be planted, fertilized, and irrigated, and people were getting to work on their construction projects. Everything depended on having the planting in order, otherwise the crops would fail. Even with the help from neighboring farmers who were familiar with the struggle, there was too much to do. The Tromps may have underestimated just how much they could handle. Mark was stressed and Jacoba was irritable. The noise and chaos from the renovations had started to get on everyone's nerves, and the family was on edge. Perhaps this is why Mark and Jacoba started going through the family's financial records. They might have been trying to reassure themselves about their stability and take pride in their accomplishments, knowing that they were well supported. Instead, things took a turn for the weird. It's no secret that stress can have a major effect on one's state of mind, and when people are in close quarters, it can intensify the experience. Jacoba and the rest of the family tended to follow Mark's lead, and as he became increasingly anxious, a sense of uneasiness took hold of the household. Mark pushed himself hard, and it could be that insomnia drove him to paranoia. Maybe he thought that the contractors were cheats, or that one of his neighbors wanted the farm to fail so he could steal the land out from under him. Perhaps the family's success was breeding envy in the town, but there was no time to make inquiries. The farm work had to take first priority. Mark may have felt that his strength was crumbling and that someone was after his family. He racked his brain trying to figure out who his enemies were and how they planned to bring him down. Before long, Jacoba was worked up too, convinced that Mark was onto something. But who could they talk to? What if they shared their fears and gave themselves away? Were their phones being tapped? Was it someone spying on the family? There was no time to think about what was happening. The kids were starting to pick up on the bad energy in the house, but dealing with it would have to take a back seat to getting the ground prepared and the trellises up for the currant plants, laying down the water lines, and making sure that they could plant all 18 acres on schedule, plus all the other chores that defined daily life on the farm. Rihanna, Mitchell, and Ella kept their heads down and focused on what was in front of them. But there was no doubt that their mom and dad were acting strangely. The house was getting messier. Jacoba was scatterbrained and Mark was increasingly short-tempered, until finally, on the evening of August 29, 2016, things came to a head. One can imagine how things went down on a warm night at the Tromp house just before the first day of spring. Did Mark get everyone together for a family meeting and convince everyone that they needed to run for their lives? While we may never know what Mark said that night, we do know what happened next, after the family fled into the darkness. As the family's silver Peugeot made its way east, the mood was tense. Mitchell had managed to squirrel away his mobile phone, but not well enough, and when the family discovered his secret, they made him throw it out the window. By this time, they had made it to Warburton, just 20 miles away. Fearing that they would be tracked, the Tromps had left their identification and electronics at home: cell phones, tablets, credit cards, everything. In their hurry to get clear of danger, they had left the house unlocked. Keys hung from the ignitions of their other vehicles, as if they decided at the last minute to take one car and drive to safety together. Mitchell had kept his wits about him, but he was concerned enough about his parents' state of mind that he wanted to keep an eye on them. Still, as they became increasingly unreasonable, he may have felt a bit crazy too. Surely when they arrived, they would be able to stop, take a breather, and figure out what to do next. The family kept driving northeast, and when they finally arrived at Bathurst, some 500 miles away, Mitchell had had enough. That Tuesday morning around 7 a.m., he refused to go any further, thinking that if he could get himself to Sydney, he could make his way home. The rest of the family pressed on, taking a turn southeast toward the Jenolan Caves, hoping to hide away in the Blue Mountains of New South Wales. By the time the Tromps arrived at the caves, they were in no state of mind to settle down and take it easy. Taking a road trip with your family can bring up all sorts of emotions in the best of times, but this go-around, the family was scared, amped up on adrenaline, and sleep-deprived. It's probably safe to say that at this point, no one in the car was thinking straight. Perhaps Ella and Rihanna argued with their parents. What we know is that the sisters were upset enough to leave them behind at Jenolan, and so desperate that they stole a car to attempt to get back home. About 2 hours after they had jacked the car, the sisters made it to a gas station in Goulburn. Ella was eager to get home and make sure her horses were fed and well, but for some reason, Rihanna would not go with her. Alone, scared, and exhausted, Rihanna eventually found an unlocked SUV and crawled in the back to get some sleep. At some point, the car's owner, Keith Whitaker, returned and drove off without realizing she was there. An hour later, Keith felt a kick at the back of his seat, and when he turned to look, he was shocked to find Rihanna lying across the floor, completely disoriented, saying she didn't know who she was. As Keith later told the Goulburn Post, "I turned around and saw two legs stretched across the back between my seat and the floor. She was lying on the floor," he said. "I got an extreme shock." He called the police and took Rihanna to Goulburn Hospital. Back at the farm in Melbourne, neighbors had already realized that something was very wrong. When they realized the Tromps were nowhere to be found and weren't answering their phones, they called the police for help. Word of the family's disappearance spread quickly, and soon the media picked up the story and the police began searching Australia's highways for a missing silver car. The interstate search began. On Wednesday, Mark and Jacoba left the Jenolan Caves and headed back toward Melbourne. After driving nearly 400 miles and crossing back into Victoria, they stopped in Wangaratta, and it was there that Jacoba likely decided to hop a train or bus back north to Yass. Mark stayed behind in the car, and it's safe to say that his state of mind had not improved. He got back in the Peugeot and started driving around, and at around 10 p.m. that night, he found himself tailgating the car in front of him, which eventually pulled over. At that point, Mark stopped, left his car, and ran into the middle of the road. When he reached the other car, he stared through the windshield at a shocked young couple before disappearing into a nearby park. By this time, a passerby had found Jacoba wandering around Yass, frantic. They took her to a hospital where doctors assessed her condition and determined that her mental health wasn't of a good standard. Once the staff discovered who she was, they moved her to Goulburn, where she was reunited with Rihanna, who by this time was in psychiatric care. When Victorian police arrived at the Tromps' home on Tuesday, they found the doors unlocked, so they stuck around to investigate. That evening, Ella arrived back home to find the police waiting there. Mitchell showed up the next morning after catching an overnight train from Sydney. Happy to be reunited and relatively sane, the siblings began to sort things out, but they still didn't know what happened to their parents or their sister. On Thursday, September 1st, Mitchell went with police to Channel 9 to ask the public for help. He tried to explain that while he was shocked by his family's behavior, his father was not a threat. As he told Sylvia Jeffries, the host of the Today program, "He's scared that people are after him. He's not in a good state of mind. I've never seen anything like it. It's really hard to explain or put a word on it, but they were just fearing for their lives. And then they decided to flee," he said. "I've never seen anyone like this or anyone conduct themselves in this way. I just really want my dad to be found," Mitchell said. "He's not dangerous. He's my mate, my father. I love him." Sergeant Mark Knight of New South Wales Police also referred to the case as the most bizarre he'd come across in 3 decades of policing. On Saturday evening, September 3rd, 6 days after the Tromps abandoned their house, a passerby spotted Mark Tromp running along a road near Wangaratta Airport. Police picked him up for questioning, and after making a mental health assessment, they released him into the care of his brother, who was also a police officer. As the two drove away, Mark flipped the bird to photographers who had crowded around the station. By the following week, the family was on its way to being reunited. Mark had seemingly regained his sanity and felt embarrassed enough to apologize publicly for the trouble his family had caused. Still, he remained cryptic about what had caused his alarm in the first place. In a public statement, Mark expressed regret and said, "In recent days, my family's been through a difficult period. We will soon be reunited and together. I hope that we'll begin to make sense of our ordeal and return to a normal life. I am conscious of the burden these events have placed upon our extended family, friends, and the community resources devoted to our aid. Without reservation, I apologize for the hurt and concern caused by these events. On behalf of our family, I express our deep gratitude to Victoria and New South Wales Police, as well as the healthcare professionals who have looked after our physical and mental well-being. More than anything, my family and I need time to recover and receive appropriate assistance, including mental health services. To this end, we request that media organizations respect our request for privacy." Although the Tromp family had hoped that things would get back to normal as soon as possible, the public continued to be enthralled by the drama. Police continued their investigation, but concluded that the family was never under any real threat. So how did the Tromp family lose touch with reality? Sergeant Mark Knight, who was friendly with the Tromps, said they had no previously known mental health issues. Neighbors know them to be fairly normal and straight-laced. They didn't use drugs, had no serious deaths, and had no affiliations to any strange cults or religious groups. Sergeant Knight said, "This is just a massive meltdown, I'm sure of it." Mitchell tried to explain what had happened. "I've never seen anything like it. It's really hard to explain or put a word on it, but they were just fearing for their lives, and then they decided to flee. It was a buildup of different, normal, everyday events, just pressure, and it slowly got worse as the days went by." Some people speculate that the family could have been affected by chemicals they used on their farm. Others believe that they had suffered from a collective delusion in a rare case of folie à deux, also called the madness of two. This condition happens when people in close relationships experience a shared psychosis. In an interview with Woman's Day magazine, Rihanna said, "You do start thinking the same," she said. "You have a few things and they do build up. You can get sick in some way." In a press conference, Ella said, "I think our state of minds wasn't in the best place. And yeah, I can't even really, there's no reason for it. It's bizarre." Mitchell couldn't explain what had happened either, but he also explained that, "I just had to go with the family because I wanted to see where they were going. I couldn't leave them there," he said. "But yeah, it was tough to see your family like that, and I've never seen anyone like it. But the main thing is, they're okay now. Everyone's safe, everyone is well, so we can just go back to being a family again." In the aftermath of their strange trip, the Tromps had a few loose ends that needed tying up. Police charged Ella with car theft, but the charges were eventually dropped. Once it had been decided that no crimes had been committed, the Tromps were free to get back to normal and rebuild their lives. We may never understand why the Tromps had such a public meltdown when they wanted so badly to stay hidden and off-grid. Ever since their strange journey, the Tromps have laid low and tried to live normal lives. It's safe to say that they would like to put this part of their past behind them.